Welcome back to Serger Tip Clips. One of the questions I get asked most frequently when I do hands-on workshops at different locations or even in emails is, how do I end my cover stitching so that I don't lose stitches when I pull it out from under the presser foot? Well, there's an easy way to do that, and I'm going to show you today. And I think you'll really enjoy this technique. Let's take a look at the foot so that we get some landmarks on that, and I will show you an example of a finished one, and then we'll go to the machine. This is just a little sample of my stitching in the round where I use this technique, and I used red thread on it just so that the camera will pick it up easily. This is a narrow cover stitch. I had my center and left needles in. Check on your manual to see which needle positions your machine will work best on with the narrow cover stitch. You could also do the same technique with a triple or a wide cover stitch if you have that capability. On this one, I've stitched in the round all the way around, and I just want to show you the ending spot. It's right here, and I think if I hadn't used a contrasting thread, it would completely disappear. Here it is on the inside where I've buried the thread tails underneath. So let me talk to you about that, because this can be a big issue when you're hemming pants or t-shirts or skirts, anything like that. This is the big issue, is getting it out from under the foot without losing any stitches and getting your stitches to match up perfectly on the beginning and ends of this. So I'm going to move this aside and show you a couple of different feet. This is the standard foot, and it has these indicator ridges. These two are for my overlock needles, so we're not going to be concerned about those using a cover stitch. We just want our chain cover stitch needle position. Or if you have a baby lock, they have a really sleek little covered chain stitch foot that's narrow, and this is the one that I usually use when I'm doing any cover stitching or chain stitching. But I think it might be easier for you to see the indicator ridges on this, so I'll pop this one on the machine when we go over to that. Now, these indicator ridges are really important, and they will give you a good guide for making sure that your last stitches are aligned with your beginning stitches. And what I'm going to do is, when we go, you'll see that as we're heading down to the home stretch on the fabric, I will use these to make sure that I'm perfectly lined up. Another great foot for this is also the clear foot, but again, I don't think the camera will pick up the indicator ridges on it quite as easily. So let me just move this over and show you. I have my fabric all prepared, my little sample. It's exactly the same as the one that I finished. I used my double-sided fusible web, 1 inch wide, to press the hem up and make it very accurate. I'll put the fabric guide on the machine, and you'll see that, and you can refer back to the tip clip using the fabric guide to see how to get your fabric lined up to make sure that your cover hem is absolutely perfect and right where you want it to be. So I will get the machine set up, and I'll see you over there. I have my fabric guide on, and I've checked it to make sure that it's where I want the stitching to be on the fabric. And when I'm cover stitching in the round, I like to stitch inside the circle. So I turn my fabric inside out, and I'm stitching inside the circle. So I am going to put the presser foot down, and again, on my settings, I am set up for a narrow cover hem. I have my center and left needles in, but you could probably do center and right. Again, you'll check your manuals to see what your brand recommends for it. I have my stitch length on about 3. And I think that'll be good. And I never like to start or stop on a seam, so I'm going to just start a couple of inches ahead of this seam right here. And I'm using my little over the hump technique that I'll show in another tip clip. so that I get good stitching over the seam without it bunching up or the stitch is getting really tiny. And I'm just going to go ahead and start stitching, and it's just the way you do a regular cover hem until you get to the end, and I'll show you that. So I'll start stitching around and I'll see you on the home stretch. And the other thing I like to do is, because I'm stitching inside the circle, I like to just adjust. And now I'm going over that seam, so I'm going to lift that presser foot a little bit and let that little bunch of fabric relax and straighten out underneath so that it looks really nice. All right, now I'm within probably 3 inches of my beginning stitches. And this is when it gets very important to see your landmarks and those little indicator ridges on your presser foot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to untwirl my beginning needle threads, because what I want to do is, as I'm coming down to meet these stitches, I don't want these to twirl around and get tangled and then have to untangle them. It's just easier to move the left thread off to the left and the right thread off to the right. And what I'm looking at now is I want to be sure with my indicator ridges that they're lined up with my beginning stitches. And if yours are off a little bit, now's the time to adjust it. And I'm going to just overlap 1 or 2 stitches, because with this technique, the final stitches will be locked in. You can't zip them out the way you normally can with a cover stitch, because this technique is just great for this. And I'm going very slowly and just making sure I'm nice and lined up. And I'm just going to make sure that this is over a smidge. And then I kind of like to hand walk that last 1 or 2 stitches. There's 1. And there's 2. And now what I'm doing, and here's the important part of this technique. With my hand wheel, I've brought my needles up to the highest point. Now I'm going to raise the presser foot, and I'm going to take something thin, and my little needle screwdriver works very well for this, but tweezers or anything narrow and thin that you can get between your fabric and the presser foot is fine. So I am going to take that, slide it under the presser foot in back of the threads, and I'm going to sweep them forward, just like this, just about, maybe about 4 inches. And then it is snip. And just for memory's sake, it's not really quite a snap. You're just pulling it off. But I always say snip, snap, snip. You're going to snap or pull your fabric off to the left. And then you have 1 thread that's still attached to your machine. That's your chain looper thread. Snip. So there's your snip, snap, snip. So here we have our threads, and you're going to say, but wait a minute, it didn't work. I still have my threads on top. These are your beginning threads. You can either cut those, or what I like to do just to make it perfectly neat is to take a hand needle and bury those in between the layers of the fabric, and so that they don't show. And then I can take a double-eyed needle and I will bury these thread tails underneath the stitching on the wrong side. But you can see how absolutely perfect that is to finish off. These stitches are locked Nothing will pull out because those needle threads are now on the wrong side. I'm pulling on these, nothing's moving. Perfectly secure, and you have a great looking finish. Very clean, very professional. And you can see with that other little technique, going over that seam line looks perfect as well, and we'll show that in an upcoming tip clip. Thanks for joining me today for this serger tip clip, and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's free, and you'll get a notification in your emails that I've posted a new tip clip. And you can also find me on Instagram at g.p.design. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you again soon.